Situation Part 1. It is 2021. You completed your BA in ASL and English interpreting last year. You've been able to do small amounts of interpreting work as a substitute in educational settings, both K through 12 and post-secondary, as well as team assignments with your former internship mentor. Now it is early January and you will begin working at a local university doing 2 ongoing undergraduate courses this term that meet once a week for 3 hours each session. Approximately 1 week before classes begin, you receive detailed information about the courses, instructors, deaf students, and team interpreters with whom you will be working. It is the same deaf student for both classes. You know this deaf person from their involvement in various interpreting program activities. You'll be working with a different team interpreter for each course. One of the interpreters you are familiar with, as she is quite involved with the local interpreting and deaf communities. The other interpreter you have not met before. Prompt 1. What are you thinking about as you consider preparing for your work at this university, and what demands are at play? What actions or controls might you take prior to the first meeting of these courses? 3 minutes. So I would first figure out what the class was about, the content of the course, get whatever information I could about what was going to be talked about, learn vocab if I needed to, maybe try to figure out who the other interpreter is. Since it said that it's the same student that I'd be working with for both jobs and I also know them from the community, I would probably want to make sure that there would be no conflict of interest there. Other controls would be finding out what the space looks like, who the instructor is, how much time I was going to need before actually showing up to this job in order to prep myself and be ready to do my best for the consumer. And yeah, I'm going to move on to the next one. Situation Part 3. Last night you had a successful and supportive experience working with Juana in the psychology class. Teaming went smoothly and the deaf student seemed satisfied with the work and the fact that you would be one of the interpreters for the term. Tonight you are interpreting for the other class, sociology. Prior to arriving tonight, you found out some basic background information about the team interpreter, Leona, whom you will be working with from the interpreter coordinator and the other team interpreter. She's been interpreting for 20 plus years, has deaf parents, and never went through formal training. She works full-time in another job that is unrelated to interpreting or the deaf community. She works part-time at the university interpreting 1 evening course per term. Your first opportunity to meet her and talk with her was about 10 minutes before the course you were both interpreting began. You both introduced yourselves and she began telling you about how exhausted she was from a long day and that all the way here, all she'd think about was how she wished she could just go home. Prompt 2. What are you thinking? What will you say to Leona? 3 minutes. So, I would probably try to steer away from the conversation that's not about the work that is about to be done, especially with hearing complaints about her being tired and knowing that interpreting takes a lot of mental energy. And if somebody's really tired, that's probably going to have a negative effect on the work that they do. So I could let her know, like, hey, if you're feeling like you're super tired and you're not going to be able to give the best interpretation and do your best work, let me know. I'm like well rested and I'm ready to go and I can jump in at any time for you. Or even just being like, do you need to go get coffee or something really quickly and come back? Do you need to go step outside of the room and take a deep breath and kind of recharge yourself and get ready to do this interpreting work? But I think I would definitely try to keep it very professional. I think that complaining about how tired you are is like not the least professional thing you could do, but it's not very professional to come in and be complaining that you just wish you could go home. So I think I would definitely try and just steer away from that topic as much as possible and just be like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. If you need to go get coffee or if you need me to step in at any time, let me know. But I don't know, maybe change the subject of the conversation to, did you get a chance to look at the syllabus for tonight's first class, or did you get a chance to read the first chapter of the book that they're going to be talking about? Did you want to go over any vocab? Kind of just changing the course of the conversation so that it is a little bit more professional and a little bit more task focused instead of complaining about being tired. Okay. Situation part 5. You decided to try and steer the conversation politely to discussing strategies for teaming so that you could get a feel for how she works with a co-interpreter, and so you could share your preferences and needs. Every time you attempted to bring up the issue of teaming, she simply said, "I am flexible, don't worry about me." The most you managed to discuss and agree on was switching every 20 minutes, and that she would begin. It is now the second week of classes and the second session of the sociology class. Since you didn't have time prior to the first class to discuss some of your needs and teaming preferences with Leona, you made it a point to share some things with her after class last week. She seemed open and said she was not used to teaming in the way you were proposing, but she would give it a shot. You both determined that Leona will begin again this week. After you switch, she stays in the room and appears to be attentive. She is able to provide you support when you ask for feeds. All in all, the teaming is going much better than it did last week. During the first break, after 1 hour, Leona says she needs to leave 40 minutes early tonight because something has come up. She suggests that you can interpret longer than 20 minutes right before she has to leave. She suggests that she can interpret longer than 20 minutes right before she has to leave, and that way you would just have the 40 remaining minutes to interpret and be rested since you had a longer break. What are you thinking? How will you respond to Leona? And what is influencing your decision to apply this way? My immediate thought would be I might be frustrated just because if you're leaving a job because something came up in the middle of it instead of like knowing beforehand, that would be frustrating for your team. I guess it would also depend on the situation. If it was something really, really serious, I would probably tell her to just like even go even earlier, because depending on what she's leaving for, that the emotions and the intrapersonal stuff she has going on in that moment would probably kind of affect her ability to interpret successfully, especially for a longer amount of time than what we had previously been doing. So I think my response would be, first, I'm a very empathetic person, and if something is genuinely going on in somebody else's life, I always want to make sure that I am making sure that other person is okay. So I think my response would probably be like, oh no, is it something that you need to leave like now for? Are you sure you can wait whatever amount of time? I would definitely consult the student as well, because that's something that's going to directly affect them and their education, and kind of see what we could do to make it up to them, and just see like, can I take notes? Can I have, another student volunteer to take notes? Can we record, let's talk to the teacher, can we get this on video so that if there's anything that you're not understanding, we can go over later, that kind of thing, just because now we're down an interpreter, and that can really have a negative effect on the interpretation not being able to switch off and get the adequate break that you need. So I think what would be influencing my decision to reply that way would be like a very consumer focus of, well, we're here to interpret for them so that they can get everything that they need to get out of this class. So, okay, something came up that might be kind of frustrating for me, but I'm going to push that to the side for right now, and let's just come up with a solution and kind of troubleshoot this so that the student is able to get everything that they can and need to get out of class. Okay, situation part 8. It is now the 6th week of classes. You have gained some confidence and comfort. Teaming has continued to be great in the psychology class with Juana and has continued to be okay with Leona in the sociology class. The only thing that is uncomfortable now is that Leona has left 40 minutes early twice. Again, this week, Leona says she needs to leave early. She lets you know that she has another interpreting job and she must leave early from the university in order to arrive at the other job on time. Prompt 5, what are you thinking? So 5 minutes for this one. What are you thinking? How will you respond to Leona? And what actions will you take and why? So at this point, this being the 3rd time that she is leaving early, and it's clearly not an emergency, and it's just the fact that she scheduled another job on top of this job, what I'd be thinking was, if you knew that you had this interpreting job, what makes the other one so important that you couldn't turn it down, that it's going to affect this student's and this consumer's experience? I think my response to her would be pulling her aside and just maybe expressing that to her. Just saying like, hey, you've been leaving early. If you have other stuff going on, or, you know, if this job isn't a priority to you, that's totally fine, but maybe we can talk about potentially getting another interpreter to come in and take over for the rest of the term, just so that we can make sure we have 2 interpreters here and that we're able to switch off and it's not going to be, you know, an issue. And just let her know I really do just have the consumer's best interest in mind. I want them to be able to have the best experience, and I don't feel like that's been happening when you leave early. The reason I would do that is just to maybe help her realize, like, maybe she's not thinking about it in that way, and she's been in the interpreting field for a long time, so, you know, maybe it's no big deal to her, but just letting her know my perspective, and that might open her eyes to something that she, you know, wasn't thinking about before. Like, oh, you're so right. Like, when I leave early, the student is, you know, or maybe she thinks you're totally capable of still providing a very accurate interpretation for the last 40 minutes of class by yourself. So maybe you need to express, hey, it's like really difficult for me to not have team for the last 40 minutes. 40 minutes is a long time to be on. You know, this course is very information heavy. It moves really fast, or, you know, whatever it is that is difficult for you in that interpreting situation. Just being like, hey, I need a team here. If you're going to have to continue to leave early for any other day in the term, let's get a substitute for either the days you know you're going to have to leave early, or we can have somebody else step in for the rest of the term and kind of take over, so that I am making sure that I have a team and that I'm, you know, fully supported and going to be able to give my best interpretation, and the student is going to get all the information that they need. Okay, situation part 9. It is now the 8th week of classes. You are feeling comfortable in the psychology class and are enjoying working with Juana. You have learned a lot from her and appreciate her support. The students have a written exam and are quietly working. You and Juana debrief about the work in the class quietly in ASL during the exam. Then she asks you how interpreting in your other class is going. Your team in that class is Leona, right? I hate teaming with her. She's so unprofessional. I can't believe she's still getting classes here. How is it going with her? Prompt 6. What are you thinking? How will you respond to Juana, and why? So initially, in my mind, I really like, in this situation, I really like working with this interpreter. And so if I really like working with somebody, it's probably that I have a respect for them. And I, you know, and they've gained that respect from me by showing that they're professional, that they show up on time, they're there, they're, you know, good at their job, they're supportive, and, you know, I have like trust and rapport with this person. And so I think that I would definitely automatically lose some respect for Juana in this situation, because she has just kind of trash talked another member of the profession, and as much as I might be frustrated with how it's been going with Leona, and I want to vent, or I want, it's like tempting for me to be like, oh yes, and just like let it out. I think that I would definitely kind of be jarred by that, like working with an interpreter that I really, really respected and enjoyed working with. I'm thinking in my mind I'd probably kind of be internally struggling with, like, do I just, take a minute and actually, like, debrief or let out some of my, some of the stress and some of, like, my frustration that I've been having with working with this other interpreter, or do I, turn to the absolute professional that I should be in this moment and, kind of just take myself out of the conversation and change the subject. I think that I would respond by just being like, oh yeah, she has left early a couple of times, but, her and I have talked about it, and kind of just, like, given my approach of, like, this is what I did to help with this situation where I was feeling unsupported and feeling like, what she was doing was unprofessional. Yes, I've talked to her about it. It's a little frustrating, but for the most part, like, teaming is going okay. She's a good interpreter. She helps me, when I need support, like, I feel supported. It's just the leaving early part that's been a little frustrating, and but we've definitely talked about it, and we're gonna figure out a solution. And then kind of just moving on from the conversation from there. And my why behind it would be, especially that this isn't a time to debrief, like, it's, we're about to interpret for the class, or maybe, we're, like, on a break. I don't remember what the exact situation had said. So it's during, yeah. So I definitely wouldn't complain, especially because it's the same student there too, and the other student knows the other interpreter, and it would be, we're having this conversation in ASL, the student can very easily look over and notice that we're talking, and that's going to make both of us look really unprofessional. That information could get back to the other interpreter. So because this isn't an appropriate time to, like, debrief or have that, like, little time of venting, or, whatever it is that I was struggling with internally, I would definitely in this moment just keep it very professional and say, we've run into some issues, but we've talked about it, we've communicated around a plan, and what we can do to give the consumer the best experience, and kind of, like, leave it at that, and then drop it and move on to the next subject. Okay. Reflect. What did you learn about yourself through this process? Upon reflection, what values do you notice at play in your decisions and processing from these situations? What most influenced your decisions through this process? How will you use this information for your professional and ethical growth? Spend 5 minutes. Okay. I've learned about myself that I've learned a lot through this course. I'm noticing a lot of my habits and behaviors. Definitely, I know that I need to change some of them to become a pre-professional and help with my personal development going into being a professional. I have always been a very open person. I like to share. Sometimes I overshare. So this has really helped me, like, this class in general and this activity has helped me realize that, okay, like, I can recognize when it would be easy for me to just give out all the information, but I also know that's not going to be the right thing to do in a professional situation, and it's not going to bring me closer to being the type of interpreter and the type of professional in the field that I want to be. So kind of reining that in a little bit and finding other ways to get rid of that frustration besides venting and giving out information that doesn't need to be given out. Values, confidentiality, and maintaining professional demeanor in all these situations. What most influenced my decisions through this process, I feel like it's always been the consumer. At the end of it, like, it goes back to, okay, but this is about the consumer, this is about the student that we are giving services to, and they need to get the most that they can possibly get out of this class and out of their education, and that's what we're here for. And really, like, if it's something that's just affecting me, then I should push it to the side. Like, my response to her having to leave early unexpectedly for the first time, like, yes, I might feel a little bit frustrated, but I need to put aside my own feelings about it for right now and just focus on a plan, like coming up with a plan for that student to make sure that they are getting everything they need out of this class and out of our interpretations and our work. How will you use this information for your professional and ethical growth? Well, I really like having these situations to think about. I know a lot of the situations that we've come across in class and the hypothetical situations are things that were loosely based off of real events, and I know that that kind of thing can happen. And a lot of, we've talked about a lot that a lot of interpreters are type A, where a lot of us are very similar, have similar personalities. However, there's always going to be those outliers that aren't, as responsible, that don't show up on time, that don't, do their best work, that think it's fine to leave early, without considering the consumer or their team. And so I think having that information and information like what I got out of this scenario that could very well happen, is just that I know I have the tools, I know what's ethical and I know what's not, and I have the tools to make the ethical decision. And I think that's the most important thing about this whole class in general, is knowing, okay, I didn't really know what ethics was coming into this class. It was more like what people think is morally right and morally wrong, and now I feel like I have a much clearer picture, and I know that nothing's a dilemma. There are multiple solutions to every problem, and also I have so many controls that I can employ in any working situation, that is a very valuable thing that I'm going to take and use in my professional and ethical growth. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.